Hi, and welcome to From Many People's Strength, the podcast that covers Saskatchewan politics and current events. My name is Cory, and my pronouns are he and him.
And my name is David. My pronouns are they, them, or he, him.
Okay, and we have a few stories.
Yeah.
I'm excited to cover the first one.
Yeah, the first one's a unique one. You know what? I take that back. The first one isn't a unique one.
No, it actually isn't.
More of the same, I guess.
Headline could read: conservative business owner also happens to peddle in sex work. You know,
and it's
not
this
that
thing.
he's doing. Not that he's
no,
doing.
It's not.
Sex work.
He owns and runs massage parlors that have been found to be, or allegedly, I don't know, whatever level of qualifications we're supposed to put on there, but is
the
doing
evidence
more
in
than
this
just
article
massages.
is pretty solid.
Yeah, no, I'm a big believer sex work is work, right? We've talked about this before. I have zero, I think there should be zero moral weight on those who are consensually engaging in sex work. It is not my place to judge the type of employment someone chooses, as long as it's a choice, and that doesn't prohibit me from having very negative views towards those who exploit labor, right?
Exactly.
I have negative views on people who are exploitive employers in any field, whether it's fast food, whether it's a hospital employing doctors if they did so in an exploitive manner. And again, if someone is employing sex workers in a massage parlor and is doing so in an exploitive way, that is pretty morally repugnant.
Yeah.
Additionally, you have the added hypocrisy of a candidate who is running on traditional family values, running for the People's Party of Canada, is anti-choice, is anti-LGBTQ plus rights, and yet is doing this behind closed doors, and does a nudge, nudge, wink, wink when asked about it, right? Like, he doesn't even deny it. If you talked about how there were some pretty great quotes in here, but he does, you can tell it's I want to deny it so that the police don't visit, but not deny it because I want free advertising, right? He's very clearly doing a nudge, nudge, wink, wink, going, 100%. I don't want to completely say that's not what we do because I don't want customers to go, oh, okay, well, this isn't a place I can go for a rub and tug, right? He still wants the free advertising that the article gives. So,
oh boy, does he ever. Oh, geez. Yeah. No. And I mean, it's like you say, exploitative work conditions. We don't know the exact working conditions and relationship to the employees that this man has and what he's paying, what they're getting paid. If it's all on the up and up and everybody's getting paid well and they're happy, then I suppose, okay.
Yeah.
But I suspect often these are Chinese massage parlors, right? This is Chinese women. Even he talks about his wife, and even her English is not so great according to him.
Yeah.
So if the woman he married is speaking not great English, then it's possible that he's exploiting that and taking some advantage of that situation to benefit himself.
And there's issues with him not paying taxes properly. He's previously declared bankruptcy. The bankruptcy thing, that's its own
bankruptcy
issue. Bankruptcy happens. I have a lot more sympathy for when bankruptcy happens to private individuals who get overwhelmed by personal debt rather than business owners who screw over other business partners and are choosing bankruptcy as a business practice rather than running into emergency. Completely separate issue. Bankruptcy. One of my firm beliefs is if you ever declare bankruptcy, your debts get reinstated if you become a millionaire again.
I'd be
if you declare bankruptcy, great, fine. It's people need an out. If people get overwhelmed by their debts, that is understandable. But if you've declared bankruptcy to get out of debts, and in a lot of cases when it's a business owner declaring bankruptcy, the people they're fucking over are other business owners, because banks get first charge, right? The banks aren't losing out on the loans. It's employees. Not. Actually, we have good laws in Canada that bump employees pretty high up the list. Okay. But it's especially other creditors. So if you've purchased a bunch of stuff from another small business and they've invoiced you, that's one of those debts that just goes unpaid if you get
I always think bankruptcy. It's an American example, but on Sopranos, they broke out that sporting goods store. Yeah. All the stores, like, he would have got credit for that equipment that they ended up selling on the black market. They would have got screwed.
Okay. Yeah. And again, it's a different thing, but it's one of those pet peeves of mine. If you do that, if you screw over a whole bunch of other small business owners, in cases where there are employees who lose out on, pensions or things like that, and then you later restart a new business and become a millionaire again after having declared bankruptcy and walking away from your previous debts to other private individuals, usually, at that point, I think there should be a staggered process by which those debts come back again.
For sure.
I understand the idea. You don't want to punish success, but back to this guy though. Like, I think there's, I think there's a pretty clear path of the type of character this individual has.
He was campaigning as a candidate for the People's Party of Canada. Mm-hmm. They actually separated from him. I guess have we mentioned his name? I think it's I can't remember his first name, but because it keeps just saying Wauch.
Yeah. Trevor Wauch.
Okay.
Yeah. And I don't want to mispronounce his name if it's pronounced
hopefully
differently.
I hope that's correct. But
it's this thing where he's also like, he ran on an anti-immigrant platform, an anti-China platform. He wants to restrict trade with China. He talks all about traditional Western values, reducing the number of immigrants,
European Judeo-Christian beliefs.
Yeah. Eliminating things like the family reunification program, and then running a whole bunch of brothels effectively filled with immigrants in what is likely tenuous situations. Yeah. Because in Canada, pretty much anything other than any sort of work permit prohibits sex work. You cannot do sex work on a work permit.
Right.
So it
has to be something else. Right?
Yeah. Even if there are people who are legally have a work permit, they cannot be doing sex work, which puts him in a position of power over them. It's one of the arguments for decriminalization prohibits people like this from having power over sex workers. It helps cut down on human trafficking rather than increasing it. I get that it's counterintuitive for a lot of people, but
there's a very good reason to say, like you say, decriminalize sex work and push for removal of regulations like that one that stops people from getting a work visa related and doing sex work.
Yeah. So anyways, and it's again, you have assholes like this who talk one way and are just exploitive. I don't want to I definitely don't want to drive his business or drive traffic to his business.
I get the impression
the evidence is pretty clear, and him whining about health code officials and whining about people looking into it is pretty disingenuous, and
yeah, they go into it a little bit too, where he's actually forged like receipts with like he's used the massage industry code for one person that he was a customer of years ago, and put that on his own receipts, and now that could potentially affect the person who he stole that quote unquote that code from,
like an RMT license.
Yeah, kind of a license number.
Yeah. So
he's he's doing underhanded stuff, at least as it's as the evidence is laid out here. So he could definitely face some kind of investigation, I would think.
Yeah, it's you skim over this article, we could probably run you could fill the entire hour just on the shady things this one guy does.
Yeah, that's right.
There's like 10 different, there's 10 different things that you could cover.
Yeah, it's an amazing article. The research, the work put into this, the investigation put into this, it's really, really well done. This is like where journalism is done the best. This kind of stuff, right? Jeff Leo from the CBC, good work. Like I'll put a link in the show notes.
As you say, put the link up and the image up, because it's there a lot more information than we can cover in just a small segment to do it justice. Yeah,
that's right. Regina Public and Catholic school divisions are taking another look at their resource officers. The scope of the review is yet to be finalized according to the Regina Public Schools, but a look at the SRO program is likely coming. What do you think the odds are they're going to actually remove cops from schools?
Well, I don't want to get my hopes up. I know when I was working on Ted Giletta's campaign, that was one of the things that he was running on is getting them out. That was like a pretty key point for him. So I know I know that is a thing that he is supportive of. My understanding is there is you're dealing with both the city and the school board. Both pretty much need to work together to figure something out here.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't think anyone is shocked by either of your or my perspective on this, is that there shouldn't be cops in schools.
No, I suppose not. We've probably made ourselves pretty clear.
Yeah. I don't think we are subtle in our beliefs there, but
this one person from grade 12 student at Miller High School said to her the SRO program doesn't make a lot of sense, and if an SRO is at school, they should be known to everybody but in plain clothes, so that they're not it doesn't intimidate students, is kind of I guess what the student is hoping for, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, that seems like at least a reasonable change that isn't, if you're not going to remove them.
Yeah.
But
it's, again, you have them there for multiple reasons, and I think all of them are shitty.
Yeah.
It's a propaganda tool, like, especially, when they come out to elementary schools, they are there to propagandize the children and be like, cops are your friends.
When they're absolutely not.
Yeah. And like, it's this weird thing where you have a number of parents, when it comes to factually accurate information based on science, freaking out that kids are being taught things like biology and evolution or sex education, where they are being taught factually accurate information that is science-based in a science class, and you have parents who are saying that is unacceptable. Kids should be taught these moral lessons at home. The schools shouldn't be teaching morality. Like simple things like don't let people touch your genitals without your permission. Apparently that is too controversial a thought process for children to be taught. That should be coming from parents. Schools shouldn't enforce that. But these same people think it's okay to send police into schools and teach them that police are your friend. Not understanding that is also a moral and ethical.
Without irony, they think.
Yeah. And not factually accurate for a large number of students.
Yeah, that's right.
Right. So, and then you also have we do not have the same level of school to prison pipeline that the US has, but we certainly still put a lot of marginalized people in jail here.
Yep.
So
yeah, there's an over policing of low income and indigenous areas, and there's a lot. I mean, there's a disproportionate number of indigenous peoples in prisons, as it is, right? And that doesn't come from nowhere.
No, and it starts with kids. You see the same thing with Dojack, right? It's disproportionately indigenous there as well. Yeah. And police being in the schools is where that starts. And it feeds the problem and makes it worse. Right? Because if we approach kids who are running into difficulties in school as being on our side, we are on the same team trying to solve the problem, as opposed to the problem kids being in opposition to a system. Right. Then you bring in police to monitor the problem kids. And
instead of working to, like you say, instead of working to solve the problems, it's applying police. It's the same problem that's with policing in many areas of society, but it's with kids. So they're even more vulnerable.
Yeah. So it is about time for it to be removed. We don't need authority figures with guns around children.
That's right.
I'm glad they're reviewing it. I think we will maybe talk more once the review comes back. I'm once again glad that Evan Bray is saying mostly the right things. Saying he'll work with the people doing the proposal.
Yeah.
The idea that we'll be involved, but we're not leading it. Good, you shouldn't be.
Right.
That's. Oh, thank you for at least acknowledging that. I know in a lot of places the police wouldn't. They'd be offended that they're not the ones deciding whether the police should be there or not.
Asking for more work, but also complaining that they're overworked.
Yeah. And I'm trying to remember the exact number, and the article doesn't talk about it, but I remember in the lead up to the election, it was something close to $1 million that it cost the Regina School Board. This was the public school board, so I don't know how much it also cost the Catholic school board, or maybe that was the total figure, but it was something like $1 million that gets spent on this program.
So it's not nothing.
It's not nothing. You could have, instead of having 13 cops, maybe let's have 13 more teachers or learning assistants, or pencils, right? We can't afford to have school supplies for our kids, but we can afford 13 cops and paying $1 million out of education budgets to have cops advertise how great they are to children. Money's better spent elsewhere.
Yeah, that's right. Canadian-born baby denied health card in Saskatchewan. This person, Pereira. Pereira. Okay.
I believe.
Yeah, no, you're probably right. I'm terrible with names. So, she asked her first name not be used. She came to Saskatchewan in 2018 from India to go to school. 9 months ago, she gave birth to her son in Regina, and she's currently waiting on her student visa. and has a letter of offer to study at the U of S.
Yeah.
But because she is currently in a state of flux with her status, her Canadian-born son is being denied a health card or health coverage. So they're being charged $60 every time they go to the doctor. They're being charged for various any extra things they need to do. They're being charged for. She took her son to the hospital for trouble breathing and was charged $360. This is okay. So I don't understand why this is happening to her, and it doesn't make any sense to me because, as people might know now, my partner is not originally from Canada, but one of her children, our 2-year-old, was born here. And despite her being in flux with her healthcare at the start of 2020, our 2-year-old still had health coverage. So I don't know why this woman is having to deal with this problem.
Yeah. Well, it seems somehow linked to the again, that her student visa is in the process of being renewed, and there's that in between. And pre-COVID, I know there were a lot of times issues with visas where you couldn't apply, and I don't know which types of visas, but you couldn't apply from within Canada. I had a number of people I worked with who were new Canadians, and we in one of my previous jobs, we hired a lot of people who were out here on the postgraduate work permit. So went to university, there's a postgraduate work permit. If you've got a student visa in Canada, you can then get a work permit for the same length of time that your student visa was for. So you go to school, you get a 4-year degree. I think there's a cap on it. So let's say you get a 2-year degree, you can stay for another 2 years on a work permit, a postgraduate work permit. And most cases, that's enough time to apply for the permanent residency card and
Right.
But a lot of times when it was people who were applying for a renewal of the work permit, it involved going back home to do the application. You couldn't apply for the renewal from within Canada. So they would be like I have to fly home for a couple weeks, then apply and then come back. So you have to leave Canada in order to apply to stay in Canada. Which I don't know how that works with COVID times, right? Like we don't want to be encouraging people to do that. So I'm wondering if that's one of those, caught.
Yeah, it's certainly a loophole or a mistake somewhere along the line.
I think the child happened to be born in the window where it was during the flux. So I think
it's probably,
where the issue, but it shouldn't
born
matter.
In Canada.
Born in Canada. I just believe in open borders.
Weird.
I think we should have.
Yeah, that's right.
I think we should have
are ridiculous.
About 10 times more immigration than we do. I think immigration makes our country stronger. We have human beings are net contributors to a society,
yes,
right? Like we statistically can see that. Again, even if you're, this is one of my arguments so often. It's the moral thing to do, but even if you are an immoral monster and have no sense of ethics and only care about the bottom line, humans create more than they consume. We think of ourselves as consumers, but statistically, if you look at the economic underlying data, human beings create more than we consume. And that is true for virtually everyone, especially over the course of a lifetime.
There's a think tank out there. I can't remember the name of them, but they're actively working towards promoting this idea of 100 million Canadians by 2100 or something like that.
Yeah.
And in order to reach that goal, we absolutely have to have more immigration than we have.
Absolutely.
So, and that would increase our strength as a country by.
It's the people in our first story
that are stopping us. Yeah.
Well, yeah, it's that sounds great. 100 million Canadians would be great, but only if they look like me.
Right.
We don't want them if they don't look like me. I suspect this baby being denied a health card does not look like me.
Yep.
There will be visual elements that make him different from my kids.
Almost certainly.
So this shouldn't be. Again, philosophically, I think this definitely shouldn't be, and we should be encouraging more people to come here in general. But even under the system we have now, even in a system where we have limited immigration based on a point system and we should be, making sure this kid has a health card, and we get to look at our neighbors to the south for, again, the aggregate data on what happens when you deny people preventative health care. Because I don't care how anti-immigrant this province is at times, I still believe if a 10-month-old baby, or I don't know how old the baby is, I got it in my head they were several months, but
9 months.
9 months, okay. If a 9-month-old baby has a severe medical issue and will die without medical intervention, our hospitals will provide that care, even if the mother can't afford it. I have to believe that to be true, which means we didn't, it sounds like she's doing the thing, like the right thing for her child, and paying the $60 a visit and paying the $360 and going and getting the preventative health care anyways, in spite of having to pay for it.
Yeah.
But just imagine someone who couldn't afford that and who doesn't pay the $60 a couple times and the $300 a couple times. And now all of a sudden the child is in need of $10,000 worth of health care because they didn't get the preventative $60 worth of health care, and our emergency rooms that are already taxed to the limit are now, even more overwhelmed. Right. So it seems like a no-brainer. It's once again one of those situations where the moral, ethical thing to do aligns very closely to the fiscally responsible thing to do, and yet the Sask Party is still somehow finding a way of not doing it.
Of course.
So
seems like that happens too often, but
and to be clear, this is probably a bureaucrat or a bureaucratic issue that's causing it currently. But the Sask Party's reluctance to fix it, and fix it not just for the one family, but fix
just
the
to
system,
change the policy. Yeah.
So that this doesn't happen is once again unfortunate.
Darren Hill in Saskatoon City Council is facing resignation and leaves his future on the city council up to his colleagues. So I don't know what's happened since this article.
Yeah.
I haven't seen any new headlines regarding it. But city councilor Darren Hill was late to file his campaign expense disclosure, and he said that he was diagnosed with COVID-19. He said that he dealt with every single symptom that you've heard of, including brain fog, confusion, and fatigue, and some symptoms still linger. And he's also been dealing with the effects of a traumatic head injury from a vehicle collision in late 2016. And he cited these as reasons for not having his stuff in on time, but left basically the decision up to his fellow city councilors.
Yeah, as you go on, it says a Court of Queen's Bench judge can also just rule that the bylaw was broken through inadvertence or by reason of an honest mistake, in which case he's not required to resign. So a judge can also make a ruling on this.
Yeah.
It's one of those things where he won in a very tight election. He only won by 56 votes. However, the person he beat also didn't file their expense claim on time. They were also late.
Right.
So it's not like you could then say he's disqualified and the runner-up got it or whatever. Like, you'd need to do a new election.
Which costs money too.
Costs money to fill that one seat in a case where both candidates have made the same mistake. So
yeah.
I don't know.
I tend to feel pretty sympathetic towards somebody who has had a brain injury and has gone through an illness. I can see where there might be somebody who would use that as an excuse, but also I don't want to be the one who assumes that he's not being honest when he says this, right? Like,
and like, honestly, even without the brain injury playing a role, like maybe I'm being too lenient. I don't know.
Yeah.
Like, but like forgetting to file some paperwork he was 2 weeks late on the disclosure. We've talked about how
too bad.
Yeah, and we've talked about how ideally this stuff would be disclosed prior to the election, and I think in a circumstance where the default was it being disclosed prior to the election, and someone didn't do that,
it would be a different situation.
I'd feel a lot more. I'd feel a lot more anxious about this, and have a lot more passionate views. Like, I don't know.
I mostly just wanted to cover this because it's something like, I think you might end up with a lot of people who are being, rigid hardliners about the rule, regardless of his situation, because he's maybe not the guy they wanted to support. And I don't know. I don't know that I would agree with that. I don't know his stance on things, but I also don't know his opponent's stance on anything. So,
yeah. While we were talking, I looked up some information because one of the things his name, and again, everything I've said up until this point was said prior to double checking his stance on a couple issues.
Okay.
I remembered his name coming up in Saskatoon's addressing of the conversion therapy ban when they did it, and I was trying to remember if he was that one counselor who voted against the conversion therapy ban. So I was like, oh, okay, am I now defending the one homophobe on city council? In which case, like, that wouldn't make me not think he's a dick, but that, again, it seems like a technicality. And it was the opposite. His name came up because he was the one like leading the movement. Okay, to have so we ban. Didn't. So we're not just defending an asshole. I'm defending someone I actually like.
But we're not defending him because we like him. We're defending him before we knew.
Yeah. So again, if you try and look at the spirit of a law, like I think it is important that finances, campaign expenses, and all that be disclosed.
Yeah.
But if it's so when was the election? The election was November-ish.
Yeah.
So 6 months ago. So whether it's, whether you're filing it 4 months after the election or 4 months plus 2 weeks after the election, I don't know how that impacts things, right? Like the city auditor can still review it. They still have the ability to look for discrepancies or unethical behavior within it. And that would be different if that's what happened. Like if it turned out, he filed it 2 weeks late and then they looked at it and found there was a bunch of shady shit going on. That's different, right? You're trying to sneak things under the rug, right?
But then then it's the shady shit that is the issue, not so much.
Yeah, like again, if it's the 2 weeks, then becomes okay. Were you filing it late in order to try and not get caught? And then is it one of those? It's the cover up, not the crime. But,
right.
But that's not what this is, right? Like it's just he filed something 2 weeks late and may have to. And may have to resign over it. And his expenses still fell well below the limit, right? It was his expenses once filed were $14,977. So basically $15,000 on a limit of $23,000. So he basically came in at 2/3 of what he was allowed to spend.
Right.
Yeah. I hope he gets to say, I hope the city of Saskatoon doesn't have to pay for a separate election in addition to paying for the election they already just paid for. That's an added cost the city doesn't need when there isn't a strong justification for doing so. And there isn't really any sort of indication that it would result in a different result.
City of Saskatoon falls short on goals to hire more Indigenous and disabled employees. Many categories are far lower than targets set out by the Sask Human Rights Commission.
Yep. And like this is an important story. It is also a story that is very, very familiar. This is the federal government misses its own targets. Provincial governments miss their own targets. Cities consistently miss their own targets. They set targets that private businesses are supposed to aim to achieve, and then the governments fail to achieve them themselves.
Yeah.
And
I don't want to necessarily, I don't know, Regina may have also missed their targets. I don't know. This is just an article that came up in my feed on Saskatoon. So,
and again, it comes down to, the counter arguments are always, we should hire the best person. And you're right. We should. Why do you think Indigenous and disabled folk are not the best people?
Right.
Because if we were simply hiring the best people, you would essentially start to see a hiring level that was very similar to the population as a whole. Just if that's just what you would see happening. The other thing that I think doesn't get thought of as much, because we think about, trying to do this for highfalutin reasons. It's better for business to have a diverse workforce. And again, a city isn't a business. But diversity within a workforce allows organizations to have a better understanding of their client base. Again, whether it's private industry or government, you bring in people who have different points of view because of different lived experience. It makes your organization stronger. If I was running a business, I would want to have a diverse workforce, because my employees then can help give me insights into the people I am trying to serve. Right. So if I have Indigenous clients, it helps my organization, again, whether private business or government, to have Indigenous employees, because they can say, hey, I understand, I understand why this policy is here. However, here is how this could impact those who you're not thinking of right now. So I remember when I was a recruiter, I had, diversity targets and all that. And I consistently was one of the, bragging for a moment, I consistently outperformed all of my peers when it came to those targets. But I also was consistently outperforming my peers in recruitment when it came to employee retention of the people I hired, the job performance of the people I hired, because when you look for underrepresented employees, you're more likely to find better employees, because if you take the top, if you take the top 20% of any demographic, and there's demographics who aren't getting selected, you're more likely to have good employees who haven't been swept up by someone else. I had resumes where I would look at and go, this person's freaking incredible, right? Like, this is an amazing employee.
Why are you looking for a job here?
Yeah, right. And then you talk to them, it's like, because, and you can tell, oh shit, you're looking for a job here because your resume didn't even get looked at because people didn't get past the first name. Someone somewhere at the back of their mind saw an Indigenous last name and went, right. Yeah. Not that you can always tell by the name, but that certainly twigs in people's brains. So, anyways, it's unfortunate. There's work that needs to be done. And I think it's better for everyone when you have a more diverse workforce. So,
I think that is a fair statement. Bill introduced to create civilian-led independent agency to investigate serious police incidents. We talked about this when it came out in the budget that they set aside $287,000 for it. So now there's a bill introduced to try and actually put this forward. So I don't know. I didn't see a lot of details in this.
Yeah, everything I'm seeing looks good.
Yeah.
What we're seeing right now is how the government is explaining it.
Yes.
So we're not actually like, I didn't read the bill. I read, a description of it as is reported in the media, and the media is reporting what is told to them by the government, and they dig and look into it too. But I think, I think when this gets dissected a little further, by stakeholders, I think we'll know more. But yeah, it's a positive sign. Hopefully it has positive implementation as well.
Yep. Opposition NDP leader Ryan Miley said communities of Indigenous people, Black people, and other people of color should be involved and consulted to ensure the makeup, response, and performance reflects their real concerns. And I think that's a fair statement.
Yep. One of the things I liked is it talked about if a complainant is First Nations or Métis. So if you have an Indigenous complainant, the legislation requires a First Nations or Métis community liaison be appointed. So
that's very important.
Yes. Again, the proof will be in the pudding. Like we'll see how the implementation goes, and there is a very, very thin, if there is a thin sliver at all, it is a very, very thin sliver of a window to prove that this is what they say it is. I think you have a very large possibility of losing. I'm stumbling over the word. It's not respectability, but or accountability, but
even just trust in that it is what it is, right? Or that they say it is. So
if what ends up happening is all of a sudden this gets implemented and all it does is a rubber stamp for saying the police did nothing wrong, I think you'll lose trust pretty darn quickly.
Yeah.
And there may not even be trust to begin with. Like there may just not be any at all, at which case it'll make it tougher for them to do their job, because you will have people from marginalized groups not willing to speak with them because it puts them in danger.
Yeah.
But hopefully they can take advantage of a thin sliver of, trust that starts off, and they make the most of it, and it turns into more than just a rubber stamp, and they can build up that public trust over time.
Saskatchewan drivers and cyclists and pedestrians were asked in April to submit their worst roads, but 2 Regina streets make the CAA's top 10 worst roads list in Saskatchewan. The top 10 list was Highway number 4 in Dorintosh. Number 2 was 8th Avenue North in Regina. 8th Avenue North, I don't think I ever go down that road. So
it's just south of the Ring Road, right? Because the Ring Road turns into 9th Ave North. So
yeah, that's right.
Yeah. I said we suck at driving, but no, it's we suck at roads.
We suck at roads. This has been a consistent issue in Saskatchewan my whole life.
Yeah, absolutely. It sure has.
There's something about the way we build roads or whatever we're doing.
I can't remember where I heard this statistic. And so I think I heard this statistic something like 25 years ago when I first moved to Saskatchewan. So this could be completely out to lunch, but I remember reading that Saskatchewan has the highest ratio of roads to people anywhere in the world. We have more roads per person of anywhere else in the world. We have lots of roads.
Yeah,
because we have low population density. But,
and our very comprehensive grid road system.
Yeah. So
obviously the roads, various roads have different people in charge of their care and maintenance. Yeah. Highways are under the Department of Highways. City streets are under the cities. And various other roads are under various municipalities and whatnot.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and there's the you have this is again we're shifting between the micro and the macro here, but there's the famous story about how expensive it is to be poor. The guy who buys a $20 pair of boots that he has to replace every year, and the guy who can afford to buy a $50 pair of boots that will last for 20 years.
Right.
And so the rich guy only spends $50 for 20 years. The poor person ends up spending $20 a year for 20 years and spends $400.
Yeah.
We build cheap roads.
Yep.
Now, part of it is the ground shifts. So even expensive roads, you'll have issues with cracking.
That's right.
And I'm not a civil engineer. I don't want to come in and be like, oh, if we built out of concrete instead of asphalt, because I don't know where the cost.
Yeah, I don't think I did work in road surveying for a decade.
Okay, perfect. You speak then.
So I do know a little bit. No, you're right. Though we don't build our roads out of concrete for a reason, because our cold temperatures and our moisture changes. It dramatic. It takes a toll. And then of course, in some areas you have a lot of heavy traffic, where in other areas you have almost no traffic. So you have it's just a complicated problem to solve.
Yeah. So, and again, I think you have the combination of our conditions or such. And again, I do think it's a matter of, if you skimp, you pay for it in the long run. So.
A formerly twice rejected suicide prevention bill passed in the Sask legislature.
Yep. Awesome. This is very, very, very similar to the NDP proposed bill. That, again, twice turned down.
Yeah.
Again, it's an NDP bill that passed, so it's good on the Sask party for actually working with them.
Yeah, that's right. For recognizing the need and actually doing something.
Yep. So I am surprised. I was expecting either to never go through or to be repackaged as a Sask party bill, rather than them actually supporting the NDP bill. But this is actually how government is supposed to work. The opposition coming up with good ideas that the governing party of the day actually supports because it's a good idea.
Yeah.
Is how this is supposed to work. And this should be a thing Sask party supporters should feel proud of and be able to go, okay, look, we're not we can listen to good ideas from others when they're there. Yeah. I think they'd be great if they would do it more often. But again, steps in the right direction. I don't want to pat the Sask party on the back too hard, because again, also recognizing that it was the NDP who came up with the idea in the first place.
Right.
But good on them for eventually coming around to supporting it after they got mud on their face during the Tristan Durocher protest. So, and good on Durocher for the work he did in this, because I think without him, this bill wouldn't pass.
No, for sure.
I think it's pretty cut and dry that this would not pass without his work.
Yep. It needed an activist to make a big deal out of it, because it would have just been ignored.
And once again, that's when folks say, what does activism ever do? How does this ever accomplish? What do protests ever accomplish? Well,
yeah.
Now you see.
Now you know. SaskPower announces $7 million to improve reliability in downtown Regina. So that's good.
Yeah, absolutely.
Underground cables, duct banks. That's good.
Yeah,
I'm happy with this.
Good story all around. Benefits the economy, benefits the city. In the long run, benefits SaskPower, because it helps reinforce their reputation for reliability. So, infrastructure needs upgrading. We talked about that with the roads, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Let's spend money to fix things, because if we don't spend the $7 million now, we're spending $30 million in 5 years.
Yeah,
right?
That's right. Yeah.
I think the idea being maintenance is cheaper than repair. And I think this is slipping a little bit into the repair side of the ledger as well.
Probably,
but for the most part, this is catching it while it's still the ounce of prevention rather than having to pay for the pound of cure.
As you said, in the terms of the repair side of things, there's a quote here from Sandra Masters, Mayor of Regina. In terms of the pandemic, in that kind of transition into working from home, some residents and businesses are affected by the power outages. It literally shuts down work for hours for employees here in the city as well. Yeah. So it is an aging infrastructure, and we need to maintain it and rebuild it. So
yeah, it's good. Like I said, good news all around. Again, there's the benefits to the economy of having actually a good functioning infrastructure, but also benefits to the economy of hiring people to do the work as well.
Yes. Yeah, that's right.
And Masters and Verisuk also talk about that in the story. So it's a good story. Oh boy.
Yes. The 10-hour city council meeting 2 weeks ago.
I listened to probably about a third of it. I had plans that night that I couldn't listen to the whole thing. I was teaching a class, but
I didn't listen because I was trying to edit audio at the time, but I was reading the live tweets from all the media people. Yeah. Specifically Paul Duchesne. Because he's
mandatory
awesome.
Bi-weekly shout out. It's all good. I like Paul.
Yeah. And I was on Twitter for 10 hours reading tweets about this bloody thing. And it was awful. Like some of the people who came were just spouting misinformation. Correct. And just there to make hateful, just to spread bigotry through the form of concern trolling.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And there were people on city council who I think eventually got shamed into voting for the ban. And you could tell by their questions that they were hoping to have an excuse not to.
Yep.
And some of their questioning was incredibly offensive.
Oh, geez, was it ever bad?
Yeah. But the other part that I was frustrated with is even those who were in favor of the ban kind of got outclassed by the bigots they were questioning.
Yeah.
There's that the stereotypical rule of lawyers. You always hear the cliche, don't ask a question you don't know the answer to. Mm-hmm. There were a number of times that the city councilors would ask a question and they were just thrown off by the answer because the bigots have gotten really good at how to frame their bigotry as the opposite, right? So they're not anti-trans or homophobic. They're fighting for trans rights in their mind, right? They're fighting for gay rights because they're fighting for the right for gay people to have this type of therapy.
Which is, not to get too far into the debunking of it, but it's just pure lies and bullshit.
Like, it's absolutely lies and bullshit. But it's when you have a city councilor say, "Have you?" Because she was trying to prove bias, and because I was the audio stream on YouTube didn't have who was speaking, so I was going by listening, and because I wasn't consistent the whole time, I didn't know which counselor it was. But she was obviously one of the counselors in favor of the bill, and was asking questions. And she actually said, "No, when Masters called her out, like, why are you asking these questions?" Like, she said, "I'm trying to ask questions to prove bias or to show bias." Mm-hmm. But she asked, "Have you ever?" So you claim to be a lawyer who fights for human rights. Yes. Have you ever fought for the human rights of LGBT people? Oh, yes. And she's like, "Oh, what? You have?" Yes, absolutely. I've done so a number of times. Have you ever represented groups who are homophobic? Nope, I have never represented a group that was homophobic. Like
those, the questions revealed a level of ignorance on the strategies that are used by those against the LGBT community.
Because we are so used to mustache twirling villains from our media.
Yeah.
Right?
That's
it's
right.
ha ha ha, I will get those gay people, is sort of what they envision the homophobes and the bigots to be. And we see the same thing in racial issues and gender issues, right? Like, and there are some, don't get me wrong. You'll see every now and then some troll come out of YouTube and be like, I hate those, and then use the F slur. But that's not the ones who go to these meetings. They have gotten polished, and they should have learned from a year ago at the school trustees meeting, because the bigots put on a clinic on how to hide your bigotry. Right. And I wish I could remember the name of the former head of the school board. I'm guessing you're looking it up as I speak. I can see you typing, which is perfect. Thank you. But it then came out that she had this video where she was presenting to her church on how to fight against the gender and sexually diverse community without it seeming like you are. And she talked about, you bring up points of process, and you don't talk about your opposition. You say that obviously you support this, but what you talk about is rights for all people.
Was it Catherine Gagne?
It sure was. Thank you, Catherine Gagne. So Catherine Gagne basically had this video of her teaching her church how to hide your bigotry. And she was very blatant in this video. It was one of those that was leaked. Right. But it was a clinic on how to hide your bigotry. And she was like open and honest about it. Say like, yes, like we hate the gay, like we hate homosexuality, but we can't come out and say that. So we have to hide how we present our faith. Right. And she was like super honest in that private meeting on how, yes, they're bigots and yes, they hate homosexuality. But here's how you have to hide it. And then
there was
at that meeting did every single technique she talked about.
Right. Yeah. There was even some people were apparently at a course before this meeting to learn about dog whistles, not in the way to use them, but in supposedly the way to understand them. No. But then when they went and they did this stuff, like the city council was supposed to be looking and learning from this, and they didn't learn a damn thing. Like they fell for every trap that was put in front of them.
Yeah, and like maybe like obviously some of them didn't, or they didn't in the end because most of them voted.
Well, yeah, no, that's true.
Like so they voted the right way in the end. There were a couple that still voted against the one element. Even after it was watered down, because they watered down the support for Bill C-6 by removing any reference to Bill C-6 in order to get the unanimous compromise.
Yeah.
And then they still didn't get it, which again is a classic dirty trick, right? You try and you water down your opponent's argument to try and get a compromise, and then you still vote against the compromise. Anyway.
They did vote unanimously in favor of getting a bill brought in front of city council by July, I think it is.
And they bumped up the timeline on it, which is good. Yeah. I'm my only worry on the bumping up the timeline is
it's going to be too fast. It's too fast.
Ding, ding, ding. Yeah. Is they're going to then use the bumping up the timeline that they themselves voted for as a way of
There's not enough consultation. There's too fast.
That said, they don't like the bigots don't have the votes on our city council.
No, that's
right.
That seems true.
It's Trina Shaw and a couple of the others,
John Findura and
Bresciani. Those three are largely just on an island of their own, fighting against the fairly progressive remainder of the council. The remainder of the council just didn't bring their A game because they didn't know how well organized their opposition is. They got outclassed in the debate, quote unquote. If you're treating it like a game as opposed to a fight for basic rights, they lost. Luckily, they didn't change. Like they continued to vote the right way, but. Yeah. One of the points that I really like is, I believe it was Stevens, and I could be wrong, but I believe it was Stevens who afterwards talked about how he was really happy about the end result. He apologized for the discourse that occurred during the meeting, and then said it is unfortunate that there aren't people from the community on the city council itself. And I think that was a good acknowledging of the fact that, yeah, underrepresented communities are underrepresented.
Yeah, go figure.
We had I seriously had that. Okay, do I like? Is this the motivation? Because I'm in Berchiani's district.
Okay.
So if I choose to run in 2-3 years, that's who I'd be
That's
running
your
against.
opponent. Yeah.
I've said a number of times, I don't think Regina is ready for a atheist, queer, polyamorous city councilor or politician of any stripe. But
if you were in my area, I would obviously vote for you.
Thank you. I think there's there's someone else I know who is talking about running now as well. So
okay.
I think you may see Findora, Berchiani, and Shaw all face some opposition. My only hope is it doesn't get split.
I announced after the meeting on the Saskatchewan, on our Twitter, From Many People's Strength Twitter, if anybody wants a campaign volunteer to go against some of these counselors, I will help campaign. Like, this is, if there's one place that I can help out, it's that we can help get rid of we can help make a progressive city.
And I have, like, one of the things I talk about where we talk about strategic voting and compromise and all of those things, and how you're not going to get a far leftist prime minister. Like, we are not going to get a communist or socialist prime minister anytime soon. Maybe someday. Right?
No.
But where you can start influence, and again, I talk about the Tea Party movement in the States being the template that the left needs to use, and not obviously their policies, but this idea that the Tea Party didn't start with Donald Trump.
Right.
The Tea Party started with comptrollers and dog catchers and city councilors. The Tea Party started with, how can we get people, and in Canada we don't elect the same level of things that they elect in the US. Like, we don't elect our dog catchers here.
But our city councilors,
and like
school boards.
Yeah. So we can look at getting people who are progressive and far more progressive than you're going to see on a national stage elected into office.
Yeah.
In these smaller offices, and then you build from that, right? You use that as your platform to build on. So,
I mean, it's not Saskatchewan related, but for people who are watching these kinds of movements on the right a little bit, keep your eye out for QAnon city councilors and like some hardcore. Like, there's tons of them getting elected right now, and they're affecting school board decisions, and they're affecting city decisions all over the place in COVID denial and all kinds of things. And we are,
in a lot of ways, affected by our local governments far more than we're affected by federal governments.
Yeah.
Right? Like, local governance has a huge, huge impact on our daily lives. We talked about this on our show, literally on our very first episode, because when we started this podcast, it was in the lead up to the U.S. federal election, the Saskatchewan provincial election, and the local elections in Saskatchewan. And I said time and time again in those lead up podcasts, it's the local ones that get the least coverage and are probably the most important. And we're seeing it in things like this. So
yeah, that's right. Okay, so the only other thing regarding this this meeting was there's calls for change in the way that we do city council meetings. There was so many out of city delegates.
Yeah.
And I asked the question on Twitter to one of the media representatives, why are there so many out of city delegates? And apparently anybody from Canada, all of Canada, could submit to be a delegate in this city council meeting. as long as they did it 40 hours in advance. And with the organization that comes from these anti-LGBTQ organizations, of course they were 48 hours in advance. They knew this was coming, and they knew they had to be involved, and they had people from all over the country speaking against this ban.
And I have to apologize. It was I credited Stevens, who did a lot of great things in the meeting. He was the one who bumped the timetable up by the year. It was Dan LeBlanc who gave the apology. It's in the story about the changing the process. And when he said, "I'm sorry that you're not part of the city council that's deciding fundamental rights about you."
He's the province's least favorite Regina city councilor right now. But he is currently one of my favorites.
All right. Fair. So it's his apology, and he's an apology that these are the sort of indignities that you have to suffer without you here. I think in an issue where it's for and against, you limit it to a certain number of people advocating on each side. If it's a yes or no vote, you can have up to 4 people from outside the city on one side, up to 4 people from outside the city on the other, or pick a number.
That's right.
Because what happened in this one is that many of organizations who were in support of the ban kind of had a unified voice behind a small number of speakers. So there were only 3 or 4 speakers in support of the ban. A little more than that, but Queen City Pride didn't submit a speaker. We listened. Because it wasn't our place. There were people who were better educated. There were people who could advocate in better ways, and that's not that fell outside of our mandate. Maybe it shouldn't.
That's fair.
But when you have 25 out of 30 people arguing against the ban and 5 arguing for, it makes it seem like
And that's something that, like you say, Queen City Pride has this standard. They felt they didn't have the right experts. They didn't have the breadth of knowledge or need, or they didn't have the standing to have a delegate. But that doesn't stop the other side, right? They have every single person. There was a person with no relation to the city, no credentials, he wasn't a lawyer, he wasn't a doctor, he wasn't an LGBT person. He was just some bigot who wanted to have a voice on the city council. Yep. And he sits there and he gets to have a voice. And it's just, humility doesn't favor us in any way on the progressive side. We're the ones who have it, but it's not good for our side to have it.
But anyways, I think in general that needs to be addressed. And obviously not all issues are this controversial. Right. This shouldn't be controversial either, but
no. We have, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 articles related to COVID in Saskatchewan. Most of them are all stemming from this initial thing where anti-mask protesters are emboldened by the lack of response from authorities. If you don't show them that there are consequences for their actions, then they will continue them and grow stronger. We see this all over the place. The crackdown, there has been no crackdown. They crack down on the wrong protests all the time. So there has been some tickets and fines issued since this initial article that will be in the show notes came out. We had a Sask Health Authority officer, or an inspector, who shook hands with the anti-lockdown, anti-mask protesters. There was a policeman who attended a anti-lockdown rally in Saskatoon, who now had to resign. And now we're seeing there were 11 ticketed in Saskatoon because of the Children's Freedom Rally. And then there was police issued just this last weekend 16 tickets in relation to the Regina Freedom Rally. And then now the province is looking at increasing the maximum fine for breaking health orders. And the last one is that there's a Saskatoon church who's facing $14,000 in fines for ignoring for exceeding the number of people allowed to attend a worship service. And they said that they're not paying it, and that they posted some sign about police or have no authority in our walls or some damn thing. It's like, wait a minute. Isn't this aren't you the law and order people? It just blows me away. But
again, I folks underestimate the coercive power of the state.
That's right.
Like, oh, you think $14,000 fine is bad? Oh, you're just not going to pay it? Okay, you've lost your charitable tax donation status. So now donations to your church aren't tax deductible anymore. Boom.
Yeah, they could do that.
Like, that should be like, you don't pay the fine. That's the next step. All of your parishioners lose their tax deduction status for donating to you. Like, don't get me wrong. I don't think churches, I think churches should have to prove their actual charitable nature rather than automatically being considered charities. In Canada, we have a number of criteria for which something has to meet in order for it to be considered a charity. Be a church is one of the things. Like, any non-religious organization has to prove they actually do good in the world, support the homeless, support the needy. There's a variety of benchmarks to hit. Be a church is one of them.
Yep.
But like, I think that would probably cost them more than $14,000. I could be wrong. Maybe it will rally their parishioners to support them even more without getting their tax deduction. But
yep.
I'm guessing the church gets more than $14,000 in donations per year from their parishioners.
I would guess
the collection plate probably has, has enough in it that would cost them more than $14,000 because of their parishioners losing out on the tax benefits. So it's
a lot of this stuff.
I don't think that'll happen, right?
No, that's right.
The governments are going to pussyfoot around and say, "Oh, please," and if you don't, we'll ask you please again.
Yeah, that's right.
So
this increase in the fines for breaking the public health order, any individual caught breaking the health order will now face a fine of up to $7,500 with a 40% surcharge totaling $10,500.
Yeah.
And any organization that breaks the health order can be fined $100,000 plus a 40% surcharge.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And like I said, I'm not a big pro police guy.
No, and I wish that this was not necessary. I wish people could just accept reality and be responsible, but apparently we're not there.
Yeah, and I'm facing it in personal life, right? I have an ex-spouse who violated a bunch of orders. I didn't call the cops on her, but it meant I got exposed, and so did my kids. Now both my kids and I came back testing negative, thank God. But my ex ended up in the hospital, was again, burden on the healthcare system, purely because of her own choices to violate health orders. Like that, and it was a flat out choice on her part. She knew she was doing it while she was doing it, while still posting support. Like, she's the opposite of the church, because she's like, "Oh no, these are really great. I hate the anti-maskers. I hate people who are violating health orders.
Right. It's
important to follow, and we all need to work together to support this, and we need to socially distance," like saying all the right things publicly, and then but I still need to go spend time with my girlfriend, and I need to go spend time with my mom, and I need to go spend time with my sister, and I need to go spend time with my brother, and I need to go spend time with my friend, and all of this is indoors, and
I don't know, it sure seems to me like the entire city of Regina has no idea we're in a pandemic.
Yeah.
Like they all just decided it was over. So
it was funny because we were exposed, because she started having symptoms on a Friday, and she left on the Friday afternoon. So that meant she was probably contagious for her last 2 days staying here. My kids and I were so we got put on lockdown, and we were you get phone calls from the health officials, and they're talking about something like, my lifestyle does not change very much. Right? Like,
right.
What's different? Okay, well, I still do the vast majority of my grocery shopping online. Normally, once every 2 weeks, I'll do a top-up trip to a physical in-person grocery store. I guess I won't do that this time.
Right.
And I had dropped off my vacuum for repairs at a vacuum repair shop. I needed that picked up. Right. And I'm like, fuck it, I'm spoiling myself. And you were kind enough to get me a couple bottles of liquor.
The funny thing about that was I happened to walk in the store right after somebody else who was also looking for the exact same thing. And I was like, does David have two people buying?
No, pure coincidence. That's funny. But like, I haven't been in a liquor store since the start of COVID. The last time I went to a liquor store was February of 2020. Wow. I have a fairly well-stocked cold storage. And this is like, you know what? I want to spoil myself with something specific. If you're willing to get this for me, I'd appreciate it. But like this, but I'm talking to health officials like, yeah, that is not really affecting my life at all. And then when we got let out of lockdown or isolation, they called again and like, you know, your tests have your tests come back negative because there's a lot of firewalls. The left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing for privacy reasons.
Right.
And like, yeah, no, we've been tested twice. Both came back negative. Haven't had any further contact. Remained isolated. So, okay, you're off isolation. I'm like, well, that will change absolutely nothing of how we do stuff. The only change was the only time I've left the house since coming off lockdown was my kids, because of all of the stress of what they're dealing with, chose to stay home for an extra week of at-home learning rather than returning to school when the other kids returned to school. Oh, okay. So I stopped off at the school to pick up their learning package for the week. But again, that was like, I drive up, phone, someone comes out, hands me a plastic bag. I hand her a plastic bag with their homework from the previous week. Yeah. we make the exchange. I get in my car. I hand sanitizer my hands and the outside of the plastic bag she hands me and drive home. And I haven't left my house since. And other than to go get the jab. That was the only other time I've left. But like, we don't need to leave the house as much as we are. We, the collective, that's right.
We. Yeah, the we. I still work outside of my house, obviously. But now that I'm working down at my old job again,
right,
I'm exposed to far less than I was before.
Yeah.
Because I go to a place where I work on my alone all day, and I come home and I go to bed.
Yeah, and being around other people for work is a different thing. Like, don't get me wrong. Yeah. I recognize my privilege in being able to work from home during this pandemic. Right. 100%. That is a privilege I have. So for people who have to work outside the home, that is a different risk. But that's not on them. That's on.
There's no way that everybody that's out there right now is doing it because they have to work.
No, God, no.
The streets are full. Like, it's almost like there's no pandemic. So
yeah. And I like some of it's, we've got the vaccination and, after one shot, we're starting to feel a little bit more bulletproof again. And we're not like,
right.
It's 3 weeks after your second shot. I feel like, admittedly at this point, if I get it, I'll get lesser symptoms likely.
Yeah.
But I
just
can
a
still
little more patience.
I can still pass it on to people who can't get vaccinated. People who choose not to is a different story. But it's the people who can't that I do still feel for.
I have not had my first jab yet. Every time I try to book, it's on days that the only availability is on days that I'm working.
Book, no, drive through. Go drive through.
Okay.
100%. Actually, get the editing done quickly so our listeners can take this advice. Go to the drive-through. I went at the drive-through. I checked online. It said I was watching in the morning because I couldn't go till later in the morning. So 8 a.m., 2-hour wait, 9 a.m., 2-hour wait, 10 a.m., 3-hour wait, 11 a.m., back to a 2-hour wait. And I'm like, okay, I went and I'm like, all right, have lunch with me. I made a big cup of tea. I have just mug for tea in my car, have this water bottle full of water. I brought my laptop with me so I can play some computer games and get caught up on work for this wait. I phoned my partner on the way and it's like, yeah, it's a 2-hour wait. Now it's back to 2 hours. And they were like, no, if it says 2 hours, plan for 4. I'm like, oh, I have. I got laptop, phone, fully charged. Everything's good to go.
I'm on the board. Yeah.
I was out in under an hour.
Nice.
I pulled in at, I think it was 11. I remember looking at the clock because I wanted to time it. Pulled in 3 cars before I entered the actual building where the vaccination happens. They come out and they're like super apologetic. We're really sorry. We need to pause. It's only going to be a 20-minute wait. We didn't run out of anything. We need to stop the vaccinations for 20 minutes and then we'll start back up again. I'm like, okay. That was the only thing, because other than that, the line was never stopped moving. So I'm like, wow. My laptop. I'm like, I could get caught up on work, but I'll play a little Civilization instead. Play some video games. And 20 minutes later, sure enough, got in, got out. They make you sit in a parking lot for 15 minutes after you get the jab.
To make sure
with big signs that say, if you have symptoms, if any of these things happen, hit the flashers, honk the horn, and a nurse will be out to you.
Okay.
Between when I entered the exhibition grounds and when I left the exhibition grounds, I believe was 1 hour and 5 minutes total, but I think I sat in the parking lot for about 20 to 25 minutes rather than only 15. And there was the 20-minute delay partway through. So had I been 3 cars sooner and had I been set a timer when they said wait in the parking lot for 15 minutes, I probably would have been about a half hour. So go to the drive-through. I think they ran out of vaccines recently, but as soon as they get the next shipment in, they'll reopen the drive-through. It is quick. It is easy. You in and out. Yeah. No, I was expecting 4 hours. I was prepped for a 4-hour wait, just in case, right?
Because I'm doing I'm looking at the booking online and I couldn't find one.
There was none in Regina.
And then so which day can I go? Which day can I afford to not do deliveries so that I can take 4 hours to get my vaccination?
Yeah.
But if it's going to be a little quicker, then I'll go in here right away.
And I encourage people to go do the drive-through. It was super slick. I had, it's, there are a number of places, and I heard 1 or 2, I don't say even horror stories, because it was always from people who were saying I'm super glad I waited, but it took me X number of hours, but not many. Overwhelmingly, all of the social media posts I'm seeing are, it was in and out super quick, way quicker than I was expecting. And that seems to be a universal experience for people.
That's good.
Go get the jab. We can all be free.
Yeah, that's right. All right. With that, you can find us at anchor.fm/FromManyPeoples. You can find us on Twitter at skpoliticspod and facebook.com/FromManyPeoplesStrengthPod, or email us at FromManyPeoples@gmail.com. And you can buy us a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/FromManyPeoples. We have now had 2 people buy us coffees. Das Richard, our YouTube fan and commenter, who happens to be a conservative, and Humanist Dork on Reddit.
Nice.
So thank you to those 2 people for supporting the show. And we will, once we're both vaccinated, we'll go for coffees and we'll make good use of that.
Perfect.
Well, thank you, David, for joining me this week.
Well, thank you once again, Cory, for, like I said, doing all the hard work. I get to show up and just spout nonsense. So you get to be the one who actually does the editing and making it pretty for the YouTubes. So I thank you for all the hard work you put on the show.
You bet. I enjoy it. So
good. I'm glad. This would be a really crappy thing to do for fun if you didn't have fun with it. So
yeah, that's right.
I take my hat off to you. I get to have fun with just the chatting, but you do a lot of extra work, and like I said, it is very much appreciated.
Good. Yeah, no problem.